Hello, and welcome to the Muse's Lab, your destination for all things spiritual, sensual, and pleasurable. Here I explore the nuances of our human experience, connect with practitioners to support your glow up, and share my lessons and blessings as perspective to move you closer to alignment and self-empowerment. I invite you to join me on this adventure of discovery, and hope what you receive inspires you to become the muse of your life's journey. So without further ado, let's explore. Hello, and welcome to the Muse's Lab podcast. I am your host, Siobhan L., and I have an esteemed guest in the building today. I am super excited. I'm going to read a bit of their bio first before I tell you who it is. Excitement. Y'all know if I knew how to do the hand clap sounds that would be happening right now, but I'm not there in my production game yet, but praise be, we're going to get there at some point in time. This is a one-woman show. So our guest, the bio of our guest, is the CEO of the Free People Project. She earned her bachelor's in cultural anthropology and political science and has a master's of arts in social change with a concentration in spiritual leadership, womanist theology, and racial justice. The core and center of their work is the professional and personal liberation of Black women and femmes. They've authored several books, including Sacred Texts for Black Folks' Soul, a book you should leave on your altar. You may know her from numerous guest appearances on podcasts, YouTube channels, and Instagram Lives, where she talks about the decolonizing authority, racial justice, Black women's body ownership, and womanist theology. They are a dynamic speaker that talks about the embodiment of hip-hop womanist perspective, and they focus on healing the past and present to create legacy and fulfill the highest imagination of oneself. As the founder of the spiritual mentorship project entitled Dream Yourself Free, their message encourages the participants to understand that living a healed, holy, easeful, and pleasurable life is the actual resistance, work, and activism. There's so much more to their bio, but I'm just going to tell you who it is. We have EbonyJanice in the building.
Pew, pew.
Pew, pew, pew. My yes. Oh, thank you for joining. I am honored to have you here in the building today. I am a newbie, yes, but I'm also a lover of your work. I believe it was Rashida Miller-Webb who introduced me to your work.
Okay.
And she posted something on Instagram, and I was like, oh, share. It was like an immediate share. I was like, oh, this is a word. And I shared one of your posts in my stories, and I was like, follow. And I have been following you ever since. And I'm so excited to speak to you. I was telling you that I am halfway through reading your book, All Black Girls Are Activists, which is speaking to me heavily because I never, that's I was about to lie. I have thought of myself as an activist, but I think because there's an intellectual aspect to activism that I don't feel like I've met yet. Like there's so many Black intellectuals and people who've read all the sacred texts from all of our mothers, the Tonys, the Audreys, the Zoras. I haven't read all of those different
So
those
you're
books.
going to get to the chapter In Pursuit of Authority before the end of this book, and it's going to tell you that lies. Yes, there is I think there's a contemporary intellectual aspect to activism, but I think that's the least important aspect of activism. In fact, In Pursuit of Authority, I think it's the last chapter, as a matter of fact, in the book, All the Black Girls Are Activists. In Pursuit of Authority is really talking about the fact that I call it the range. This is my, it's a 3-part theory, ethic, praxis. And so the theory, the ethic, and praxis of our elders wasn't necessarily that they had read all of the text or that they knew all the things. In fact, thinking about, the first activist on this, the first particularly Black femme activists on this continent were Black enslaved women, rebelling from the idea of chattel slavery. And a large percent, let's make up our own percentage of that. Let's say 95% of them could not read, and or if they could read, they could not read legally. So reading all the text was not required to say, I am in pursuit of liberation. I am in pursuit of justice. I am in pursuit of freedom. And that is, I want to insert that very quickly, because I don't even want your listeners to go another second, or you to go another second, thinking that activism is so deeply, rooted in this intellectual aspect, when in fact, I think that that's a major part of this contemporary social justice industrial complex, is that in order to be an activist, you got to say all these profound things, when in fact, the most profound thing that you can say is, I'm going to be free, and then do that,
I love that. That made me think of Pursuit of Loudness when you were talking about your cousin. I was like, ooh, it resonated with me, because being an authority over yourself at such a young age, and then being able to say, no, this is not what I'm going to do, and stand on business and do that at such a young age, that it speaks to your point. And that is activism. It's revolutionary. It's radical, because anything just based on what we know to be revolutionary and radical, anything that goes against the grain or goes against the norm is what is activism, is what is radical and what is revolutionary. So thank you for that, because most of the listeners know I talk about it all the time. I have ADHD, and that has affected how I read. And it's not that I don't want to read, it's just the inattentiveness and not being able to absorb information. It stops me from reading, and I get embarrassed by not being able to do that, because I feel like I'm missing out on so many different worlds. But because I haven't been able to learn how to navigate it, I can now. I'm on meds, so I can now, and that's why I've been able to read. So I'm really excited. So
I just saw this thing on Threads today. Literally, this is for you. And I'm gonna see if I can find it very quickly. It basically said, I must not have reposted it. It basically said, you can't tell me that people who are descendants of a history that is mostly oral,
I reposted that today.
Believe that audiobooks isn't reading.
Yes. I reposted that today.
I love that. Yes. I love that. I might have been following you and reposted it then, because it was literally just in my timeline today, and I was like, I got emotional reading it, because
so did I.
There are so many people who try to negate the idea that audiobooks or even podcasts or even, wherever you get your most informed, right? We want to cite our sources and check the credibility of where we're getting our information from. But if you are hearing it, it is equivalent to reading it. We come from a oral history. My religious spiritual practice is Ifa. Ifa, you cannot go pick up a book and be like, I know everything there is to know about Ifa now. You can't go pick up a book and know 3% of what there is to know about Ifa, because it is, thousands of years old, and the large majority of what we know about Ifa has been passed on from generation to generation through practice. That is why you might be called an Ifa practitioner, because you have to practice, you have to study, you have to learn with the elders. And so, we bind Satan in the name of Jesus for folk thinking that we can't hear the thing and know the thing. Also, ADHD team too. So you better keep us on track, because I'll talk about really certain things.
I'm gonna try. I'm on my bed, so I'm gonna try to keep us on task. I'm gonna try to keep us on task. So thank you for that. I saw that this morning, because someone I follow said, and I was really shocked by her saying that. She said something about audiobooks isn't reading, and I was like, what? I was like, dang, I got to block you for that. Wow. You. And then a couple, maybe hours later after I saw that tweet popped in, and I was like, repost. Because it, to your point, how can you say that when for indigenous people, and Black folks are indigenous, for indigenous people, everything that we do is oral. So I am an Ifa practitioner as well, but I was raised in Santeria. So that whole, what book? everything I know is embedded in my head.
Please give me a book with my, the intellectual academic in me do be looking for books. And I found a book of Ariki recently, and I told my Ianifa about it, and she was like,
Because have that information wrong.
These translations are not even accurate, girl. Just come to the Elay and learn.
That's it. Yeah. So again, thank you for affirming me in that, because that has been like a kind of like a barrier for me, and also stepping into this, because a lot of the people that I follow who are part of the spiritual activism and women activism, pleasure activism, they are very much intellectuals, and I listen to them talk and I'm like, man, I need to pick up a book, but how am I going to get through half of the books that I got? Because I got about 30 unread books. Thank you.
Yeah. I also was just thinking, as you were just saying that, like all the people that, you follow, very similarly for me, I have, I have this experience of feeling like there were so many people who are my contemporaries that they don't talk like me, they don't sound like me. And the more that I've done my own healing work and been in my own healing journey, I really realized that the larger portion of who it is that I am here to speak to need for me to not sound like that anyways. It's important for me to not sound super, like, I'm not saying to not sound super smart, but why am I using $10 words when my primary audience is like, so I call it Cliff Notes for the hood, and that's a really just kind of like my hip-hop womanist language for it. I'm not necessarily talking to people from the hood, but I just call it Cliff Notes for the hood because I know that I have the capacity to translate it in such a way that across, if you speak these languages, if you speak the language of the color purple, if you speak hip-hop, if you speak, Black Girl Churchy, if you speak in air snatches, right, then you can absolutely understand this. And I want to figure out a way, and that's the work that I feel like I'm doing. I want to figure out a way to take this information in and then share it in such a way that it doesn't feel inaccessible to my primary audience in the first place. We don't go to grad school for and then leave grad school and then start talking to all my family members like, and then they would look at me and be like, girl, go to hell or go to jail.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love
it's
that.
Your audience. Who's your audience? And let's let's be crystal clear about that. And that for whoever their target audience is, with that kind of intellectual, I'm not knocking it, but my audience is not looking for that, and they will close their ears and probably unfollow if I ever started doing entirely too much. It's when you read the intro, and I'm done with this sermon, but when you read the intro, even to all the Black girls or activists, I say in the intro, please just hold on. Because I promise you, this book is not about to do what this is. I have to really flesh out the definition of womanism before we can move forward. But the rest of this book is not going to sound like this. Just give me a minute to get through this. Hold on. And so many people have said, reflected that back to me like, oh, girl, thank you. Because I got to page 2 and I was like, I didn't take this class. Just hold on. Get to page 4 and I'm going to start cussing and saying coochie.
Yes. And that resonates with me because I write like that because I recognize as a fellow graduate student, you get so used to doing those dissertations and having to use those $50 SAT words and speak at a high level all the time, even working in corporate, having to speak at a high level all the time. And then recognizing that when you're talking to your fellow community members, that the information has to be accessible. And for me, language has been super important, like decolonizing language, even like separating like how we are talking about feminine and masculine expressions and making that accessible, because I have a huge queer following. So all of them don't identify as that. I have a nice non-binary community. So how do I talk about masculine and feminine in a way where they can see themselves in that as well? So that that resonates with me. Language is like super, super important. And it makes me think about I always talk about I'm able to take complex ideas and simplify them, but then I'm asking myself, am I like really simplifying them, or am I breaking it down in like a layman's terms that feels universal, but that still isn't accessible? Like, am I talking to my people?
Right.
Am I breaking it down in layman's terms for like the white gaze,
Right.
or am I breaking it down so my people can understand it?
Right.
So now that's activating something in me, like, well, I really just need to talk like myself. And the importance of talking like myself. Yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah. This is definitely part of my testimony, or, or that I feel deeply that the more you look like, sound like, actually be yourself, the more your people will show up and really resonate. Like it's the corny, the teenagers hate it when I use this. Like, they still like, oh, you think you're like a little Sunday school teacher or something. But I use this example of, like the radio, the radio isn't like this anymore. But when I was growing up, of course, radio had a dial, a knob that you would turn. You wouldn't just press a button. You would turn the knob, turn the dial. And so you dialed.
I'm an elder millennial.
Yeah, 93.1 and 93.1 FM. When I get to 93.1 FM, I expect to hear R&B. Like, that is my expectation. And if I turn to 93.1 FM and I was looking for country music, then I am going to turn away from that. So it's the same with your own frequency, that if people are looking for you, and if they turn to the, EbonyJanice station, FM station, and I'm over there sounding like Siobhan, like, it's going to be weird. Like, not even, it isn't even necessarily that you are saying anything wrong, that Siobhan is saying anything wrong. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for EbonyJanice. And so the more I can, but then the other part of that, this is the part that is like the corny, but it's just a good representation if you understand radio frequency. You could be between stations sometimes.
Yes.
And you can hear the crackling, and you can kind of hear the song. So you can hear it, you can't hear it clearly until you put one more time and you get on the right station. And that is often what we sound like when we're trying to, like, I'm trying to speak to my people, but I'm still kind of stuck in, in this white gaze, or I'm still kind of stuck in this intellectual language, or in this academic or corporate speak. But the more I sound like myself, even if I am in a corporate space, even if I am in, I put this on my tombstone, I ain't never code switched in my life. So when I am in even so-called predominantly white spaces, I will sound like this. Exactly how I'm talking, not just my tone, but the language that I use, all of it. If I am for you and I switch up and I quote Jay-Z, and it's a room full of white people and only one black girl in the room, whoever got it. And that's who I came for. And trying to appease and appeal to a demographic that I didn't come for, if you got it, that's the overflow. But I really was talking to that black girl in the back of the room. So congratulations to anybody else that ended up in the overflow. But it's literally like, how much more can I tweak? Is that me? Is that true? Is that really me? Is that how I really sound? Is that what I would really say? And the more I really tune into that and, pull in those spaces, the more I realize that my people show up and have no limits, no boundaries to what kind of work they're willing to do with me, right? That, because they were like, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thanks.
Yeah. So I didn't realize you was going to minister to me today, but you are. And I receive it all. I receive it all. Yeah. My people did this, because I've been struggling with that for a very, very long time. And this is very resonant with me. So thank you.
This is good.
Thank you.
Good.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So the real thing what we came here to talk about was, so as I was reading your book, I was telling you the essays that stuck out for me were In Pursuit of Loudness, In Pursuit of Unshamedness, and In Pursuit of My Body. And I was actually on my way to read In Pursuit of Authority. But I was like, I'm not going to wrap it up in time, so let me just work with what I got. So those were the essays that stood out the most for me, because in the work that I do with the Muses Lab, right? So the Muses Lab has evolved itself. Originally, the name of the brand was Say It With Sex, and that was a conversation about who are you in sex and how does that translate across every aspect of your life, thinking about the archetypal ways that we show up in the bedroom and in the boardroom, and how do we kind of like switch off, and who are the different personas that we can be in sex, right? Or in the sexual energy. And that evolved into deepening my practice into pleasure, or deepening my leverage into pleasure. And I rebranded to the Muses Lab. And as I rebranded to the Muses Lab, because I was on like this big sexual sovereignty thing, I'm like on the gram in my lingerie, and I'm fat, black, and queer. So I'm like, yes, I'm here and everything. And then, I did like a shift, because there's a spiritual component to this that I was starting to leave off, because sex is spiritual and sensual. We all know those things. So there was a component that I was kind of leaving off in my sexual sovereignty space. So I took a step back and had to think about, how are we musing pleasure? How are we looking at pleasure? And I started building out like a pleasure framework and all these things. And it wasn't really until like last year I realized that I'm the muse. And that was a struggle point for me, because so astrologically, I'm a Leo sun, but I do not like being in the spotlight. I like to be acknowledged. I like to be known for what I do. I like people to recognize me, but I do not actually like the spotlight on me. So by me being the muse, that meant I had to be in the light, and I operate my shadow very well. I like my shadow. It's a fun space for me. I can move in stealth. I can be in and out. It's cool. But in order for me to do the work that I desire to do, I have to show up in the light. So once I realized that I was the muse, I was like, oh, so people supposed to see me fall. Oh, okay. So how do I do that in a way that I don't feel like I'm betraying myself, or I'm betraying my vulnerability, or I'm being too vulnerable, or I'm showing too much? So that has kind of been where I'm at, and showing up as myself. So the pursuit of loudness and being in my body, and what that looks like for me, and being unashamed of all the different aspects of my body, is of myself, me having ADHD, being neurospicy person, and all the different transitions that I'm going into. So that led me to how does the intersections of hip hop now, how does that contribute to the reclamation of pleasure? And like my throat is everything. My throat chakra must be opening. And how does that contribute to pleasure and the fourth wave of womanism text? Like, how do we use today's hip hop, or even past hip hop? How do we use that as sacred text to reclaim pleasure and reclaim our bodies?
It's so perfect that you just were coughing, and then you said that your throat chakra must be opening, because I think that is what it is. That is just it's not just a thought. It's the thought is so powerful, but it's just the words that we're saying out loud. Being able to open up your mouth and communicate a thing, whatever that thing is. And even trying some things out until you find a place that you really want to land and live for a while. Not forever, because we will, the same way that you talked about the fact that the Muses Lab used to be called something else, it is very likely that the Muses Lab will evolve again, and or you will retire and become something else, because that's life, that this idea that we will do, say, be, believe one thing for the rest of our life is wild. And if that is the case, if you are doing, saying, believing the same things that you were doing, saying, believing 15 years ago, pack it up, honey. It's time to there needs to be some evolution. There needs to be some growth. So just thinking about that throat chakra, and this question of how, or how, maybe what is also inside of that question. How is hip hop and women in hip hop, or hip hop in general, doing the work of helping us to reclaim or to assert, that pleasure is essential, it is necessary. And I think it is that. And so the examples that are very easy to reach for, right? We could easily reach for sex, just sex as the statement, like sex, fucking, dicks, pussies, whatever, that language, saying those words out loud it's really activating something, whether it is helping us to get over our trepidation to talk about those things, to use to use that kind of language, right? Like we need to be desensitized to our ick around talking about body parts, talking about sex, talking about it as if it is this shameful thing, and not talking about it as if it is a very necessary part of life, literally, because the ways that people who can give birth 98% of the time some form of sex had to happen in order for that to be a reality. And so thinking of I just made up that statistic, so it could be less than that, but I'm just saying it's likely that sex happened for a new human being to be created. Absolutely. And so we need to be able to talk about sex. And I think that hip hop has been doing a good job. I'm doing quote fingers for those who can't see me, a good job of bringing us into this era of being able to talk about it, even if we have some unhealthy ways in which we talk about it. And so I'll even connect that back to the throat chakra opening, because sometimes you could be communicating, and that's good because it's activating something, but also you could be communicating in a way that isn't mature. And so you could have a closed, your throat chakra could be closed. And the throat chakra, for anybody who maybe listening not necessarily know what that is, chakras are energy channels throughout our body, and your throat area is one area where energetically there cannot be enough energy flow, and so that would be considered a closed throat chakra. And then energetically, it could be too much flow, and that would be considered an overactive throat chakra. And so what does it look like to balance the throat chakra in such a way that not only are what you're saying activating something, the words that you're saying is activating something, but also you're speaking from a mature space. So the words that you're saying is activating what you actually meant for it to activate. So hip hop, we've been talking about sex since the 80s, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me, right? So we started talking about sex, and even that very playful kind of ditty is the way we started out. And now we've advanced to saying we're talking about it in much more vulgar ways, or ways that would be considered vulgar. And I don't think that there's anything right or wrong to judge about it. I think it's important to just note that there is something that hip hop is activating, and at the very least, it's giving us the space to talk about it. Even one example that I'll give very quickly, and I'll move on, is I remember when Alicia Keys and Jay-Z's song New York, Jay-Z says something, "Mommy like a bus stop, everybody," whatever he says. I can't think of the lyric right now, but I remember I was actually going to this church at the time, and I was with a teenager and her mother. And so me and the teenager just rapping along, and the mom was like, "Wait a minute, what's going on here?" Like, she heard. And how powerful is that, though, that a conversation that they were not ready to have, that mother and that teenager, hip hop gave them the opportunity to have that conversation. What do you know about this, Jasmine? What is this? What do you think they're saying when they say this? What do you think is happening? And so hip hop gives us that. I can't think of any other genre, particularly of art, that is contemporary specifically, that gives us the space to have uncomfortable conversations, and gives us the space to, talk about just things that we otherwise would not be talking about. You have to be able to. Many people aren't, but you have to be able to, especially if you have young people around, you have to be able to have, some kind of communication about it at the very least. So I think that's one way in which hip hop is giving us access to a conversation around pleasure, because we weren't talking about it. Leaving sex, and I really am done with this sermon, but leaving sex, even thinking about Meg Thee Stallion. And how Meg Thee Stallion is the example I'm going to go to right now, but there's so many. I'm thinking about J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Jay-Z, all of 444. Thinking about Meg Thee Stallion specifically, talking very vulnerably. Meg Thee Stallion is in her soft girl era. That's a conversation for another day. My next book, we'll talk about that maybe later. But Meg Thee Stallion is in her soft girl era. And what I mean by that is I'm not talking about luxury and, all that.
Right.
When I say soft girl era, I mean in her vulnerability, in her doing the work she has to do to regulate her nervous system, feeling her feelings, sometimes publicly, sometimes through her music. And there is no way that we could talk about pleasure without talking about regulating a nervous system, right?
Yes.
Because pleasure is a location, and you have to be able to wade through, the hurts and, like, this is something. What is this feeling? What is this knot in my belly? What is this, something that's sitting on my chest? What is this, right? And so it would require a regulating nervous system to be able to identify, I know where I've landed. And also I've spent so much time there. I know how to navigate myself back to that. And that, I think, like, hip hop is also giving us that kind of language of like, oh, we're trying to get not just our mental health, together. We're also trying to come to a place where we can articulate, again, that throat chakra, where we can articulate for ourselves and for others. This is where I am. This is what's happening for me. And the only way I can get back to pleasure is if I'm able to say, stop, I don't like that. That is harmful to me, or why is that happening to me? And, or if I'm able to say, give me more of that. Yes, more of that. And, it would take a situated seat itself to be able to even be able to, speak to that.
I'm absorbing because I like that. And I don't think it's until someone kind of frames it that way that you go, oh, that's what we've been doing this whole time. Because you think about every song that comes out and you're in your group chat and people are dissecting lyrics, even like I'm trying to think whose song that we just dissected. Oh, the whole Drake rap beef. Everybody was dissecting lyrics and things of that nature. And you don't realize that it's giving you access to language and conversations that you've never actually had before.
Right.
And how hip hop becomes the gateway to bridging the gap of understanding, or becomes
what other genre of music, but what other genre of art in general? I know, because hip hop is the most accessible, even, right? You could go to a museum and there are many conversations that could be had as a result of this visual piece of art. But what living, breathing, accessible, right at your fingertips art is as readily accessible as hip hop. That is in a lot of ways forcing us, particularly those of us that listen to hip hop, right? That's forcing us to, at the very least, talk about it a little bit, even if we aren't going deep into it, where we are, that throat chakra is activated because there's some kind of happening.
Yeah, that's true. Because I mean, the next best thing might be R&B, but everybody doesn't listen to R&B. And I feel like hip hop is a more universal across genders, across races, across cultures and creeds. Like everybody is experiencing hip hop. So that brings it casts a wider net for a broader conversation, because even when you're on social apps, you don't even realize you're talking to someone from across the pond, but you two are like back and forth going over the different songs and going over lyrics and what these lyrics might mean and whatever metaphorical inferences that might be there. And it really is this gateway to bridging the gap in communication. And even if in your space, if you might want to say something about something, or you've been scrolling through the conversations and someone has a comment about something, and within your spirit, in your gut, that doesn't feel right, and now it activates you to now speak, and now you're on the threads and you're commenting and you're speaking, and you weren't going to speak because it's above you or it's beneath you, but now it's not. Now it's meeting you in the face. So now you're there. So yeah, that
is also, you said hip hop is the most accessible as well, kind of across the board. Hip hop is also the reason why this so-called Gen Z speak Gen Z language, because hip hop gives little white kids access to language that they would not otherwise know, because hip hop has been because it is so commercial in so many ways, right? That it crosses it, like you said, it crosses continents, it crosses race, and it crosses religion, right? And so it's so accessible that everybody thinks they have some ownership of it. But okay, however you feel about that, that's a podcast episode for another day.
Yes.
The reality is that hip hop really carried that, message, that language, for good, for bad, for better, for worse. Hip hop carries a message, and it carries a culture, and it carries an idea, and it carries it, to these different spaces. And even if you hate it, it gives us the opportunity to say, I hate that, which, again, reconnects us back to pleasure, because it's like, I know I don't like that. That doesn't feel good in my body. I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to talk like that. I wish it was different. I wish there was more here. I wish there was less of this, right? So hip hop definitely, I think, has such a huge impact on the ways that we are opening up to talking about our yes and our no,
You said something that I wrote down, and this is actually really good, because I'm normally like taking notes, but I'm like so engaged. I'm like, I don't want to miss anything while I'm taking notes. But I wrote down pleasure is a location, and that brings me to one of the questions that I had about how women's contribution in hip hop today. How does that bring us back to the reclamation of pleasure in the body? And if we're talking about pleasure as a location and we're reclaiming our body, I'm thinking about how today's hip hop, or even past and present hip hop, because we started out with Salt and Pepper, let's talk about sex. So that brings us something pleasurable, and that has some type of location in the body. So I'm trying to connect, or I'm connecting, actually. I'm actively connecting pleasure as a location, and how the lyrics and the songs that the women are creating today in hip hop, their point of view, how that is resonating with us in the space. The first thing I'm thinking about is Megan Thee Stallion's Big Ol' Freak. I know how that makes me feel. That is a very empowering song.
Yeah. Big Ol' Freak. Yeah, automatically your body does something, if you heard the first time you heard it, and or even now when you hear it, it's something, it just do something to you. Go ahead with the rest you're going to say, because I'll take us down that path.
But that's what I'm thinking about. Like, if we're saying pleasure is a location, and for everyone who's listening, I feel like that's going to activate someone in a way. Like, wow, I didn't think about pleasure being a location, because in my mind, I'm like, pleasure is a framework, but I'm like, pleasure is a framework and it's a location. So how are these lyrics creating some type of framework with ourselves, with how we are reconnecting with pleasure and reconnecting with our body? And how are we now using the lyrics to incite pleasure as our body being the actual location? So those are thoughts that are kind of like activating or inciting in my brain right now. So that was me trying to connect.
I also think that with what you were just saying, we get to think between the sacred and the profane when we listen to hip hop as well.
Yeah.
Meaning there are times when we hear something and it's like, I said the yes and the no, there are times when we hear something and it's like, okay, I could regurgitate that. I could repeat that. I could rap that. I could participate in that. And then there's the profane, meaning it feels too far for us. And one example that I'll give for me is, I don't love Sexy Red. I know some people do. I don't love Sexy Red. I don't get it. I think that I think of Common's I met this girl now, 10 years old. What I love most, she has so much love. So I was just short, never knew throughout my life. She'll be there for me on the regular. Not a church girl, she was secular. There's something for me inside that when it comes to Sexy Red that I recognize. I'm saying that I love this for her because this is her journey. But for me, where I exist in that, in far as what I want to hear and how far I'm willing to go. Not that one is right or wrong, but I just don't love the manifestation of it. That doesn't resonate for me personally. I'm not about to be out here, whatever Sexy Red is doing, I'm doing something
Get it sexy. Right? Get it sexy. That's vocal stimming though. That's it.
No problem. So I don't love that. And so I'm saying that just thinking about how hip hop, like the lyrics and what's happening in hip hop, particularly in contemporary time with the women and the femmes in hip hop, is it's also helping us to see our, like we talking about location. I can see how far I'm willing to go. I can see where I can see what, like, that's language I'm willing to embrace, or I don't, that doesn't resonate with me. I'm not willing to embrace that. And then we get to develop our own framework as a result of that. So all of our, for me, pleasure is a location. And it's specific to me. I can't actually tell you how to locate it for you, because for me, I know what my seed is. I know when I have done the work of regulating, my nervous system to my home frequency. This is when I feel most seated in my own body. I know that I'm experiencing pleasure in this way. I could give you some tools that might support you on your journey, but I can't tell you step 1, step 2, step 3, and you will have arrived at pleasure, right? So bringing the lyrics back into that, it's the same thing. There are ways in which there are certain lyrics that will really move you, and you'll be able to say, oh, I'm willing to use that kind of language in this space. I'm willing to use that kind of language in this space. Or I realize that feels too far for me. That's not something that I would say, something that I would do that doesn't feel good to me, right? And so just playing around with that, for yourself in every way. Having conversations with your friends. What does it look like if you're thinking about pleasure as a location, and you're paying attention to your actual body in that time frame? You will begin to realize that there's certain things happening in the conversation that wouldn't work for me. I wouldn't say that doesn't resonate for me. I can't situate myself there, but I can certainly situate myself here. It's not a right or a wrong. It's just that's the journeys that we all go through to locate, like, this is good for me here. The last thing I want to say about that too is, like, taking it to the profane, taking it to, like, the most sexual, sensual self, right? So I was telling myself, I allegedly,
air quotes.
Allegedly, I was talking to this man recently after a pleasure experience, and he said, what do you want from me? Like, he was asking me, so I was saying something foolish, and it's not a bad thing. He was like, he's asking me, what do you want? And I said, well, I wanted you to choke me and slut me out, but here we are.
Yes.
And so it's, where did I get that language from, right? Where would I get that? Me, with my super Christian, I was been a preacher from the pulpit, so like, where would I get that language from? I have at some point found that language and recognized, and maybe even experienced blah 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 whatever, and known that that is a location for me, that I've experienced pleasure there. And so I take that language, and I will be able to use that language to articulate to this person participating in my pleasure, to hopefully express in this colloquialism, or to hopefully express in a way that we can both relate to, so that it goes back to the beginning. We were talking about intellectual language. I'm not about to sex with you, right? Like, I'm not about to be like, so baby, what I really wanted you to do was take your, like,
your phalanges,
right? Your phalanges, and wrap them around and squeeze it. Like, that is not the proper way. But what you instantly get is, I want you to choke me and slut me out, and/or we go together real bad, and/or like, this kind of language that we can take from this space, and it's playful sometimes, and/or it again, that location, like, oh, I can see me in that right there, and/or I don't see me in that, so that isn't necessarily language that I would use to help me, to support me in my own journey, and/or to support me and those who are participating with me in this journey. So, a lot of words, but I think, that's some of what hip hop is doing to support us, particularly those of us in these women and femme bodies. And I'm saying that specifically because patriarchy has not historically given those of us in these types of bodies the permission to say stuff like that. Mind you, this man, I'm about to tell all my business. I'm not going to go there. But this man is kind of conservative. So when I said that, he started cracking up laughing and was like, what is wrong with you? But
that's what you want.
Clear. Yeah, he's crystal clear. You know what it is.
You knew what I said.
And no matter how conservative he is, can he follow directions? Let's move on. Being fast.
Yes, that's it. That's it. That's it. Because you got to wrangle me, because I'll go there. Because that's that. I stay in that space comfortably.
You have to wrangle me. It's hilarious.
Wrangle me real quick.
Say this on the record, because I don't know how many people will know this overlap of the person I'm about to say. But this is our first time interfacing in this way. You remind me, your energy reminds me so much of J.T. Perry. Do you know who J.T. Perry is?
Yes.
So, because it's kind of your voice too. It's a little bit your voice too. But additionally, what you just said, you got to wrangle me because I'll go there. I feel like I absolutely have to wrangle J.T. Perry on a regular basis because she will go there.
Yes, she will.
All the way.
Very fast. Without thought.
Very without fast. Thought.
No, I love her. I love her deep. I love her down. And she may have shared something on social media, and I may have found my way back to you that way too. So between Rashida Webb Miller and J.T. Perry, that's how I found my way to you. So I can see that because I found Jay through Rashida. So I love how the 6 degrees of separation are coming through, and the portals are coming through, and how we're connecting to one another.
I found Rashida through Jade, so literally,
look at that
in a circle. Yeah,
we're intersecting. I love this. I love that. I love how we're all interconnected with one another. As you were talking, my meds is kicking in. So as you were talking, I was thinking about when you were saying that certain languages and certain words or certain parts of the conversation within the lyrics don't feel pleasurable. And it made me think about, or it actually gave me language when people share other spiritualists with me. And they're like so hung up and like really into these specific spiritualists. And I listen to them talk and I'm like, and I'm not thinking now I know what that is. But at the time, I'm not thinking the location and where the journey is, or where you're trying to pull me into this space with this particular person. It's not pleasurable for me. So I don't like that location. I like this location, right? So I like a J.T. Perry location. I like a Rashida Webb Miller location. Like I like a EbonyJanice location. Like those areas feel pleasurable to me. And when you said that, I'm like, oh, that's why when people share certain things with me, I'm like, nah, that don't resonate. But I'm not thinking it's because that location of pleasure it's not sitting well in my body. Like my body is actually in resistance to the location that people are trying to bring me into. So that is like a connection for me. I'm like, oh, now I have further language, and we're talking about activating the throat chakra, and all of these things are tying in together.
I was gonna go back to throat chakra again too, because that's it sometimes too. I used to use a different language for where I'm going right now. I used to say, if you're just starting out on your journey and you are on step 1, people who haven't begun, you are masterful to them. Like, oh my God, how did you get to step 1? This is amazing. And then you, however, might be on step 8, and somebody on step 1 has shared something from step 1 with you, and where you are, your location, you are located on a different space at that point. It's not better or worse. It's just you're somewhere else. So that's not going to resonate for you, but it also gives you a spaciousness. To think of it that way, it gives you a spaciousness to offer grace to wherever people are, unless they're saying something that's harmful, right? Because sometimes that's it too. Like, let's just keep it real. Sometimes it's not that we on a different frequency. Sometimes it's that because people be lying, and
it's bullshit.
You're not in integrity, and so we can really feel that, and that is it sometimes too. But sometimes it really is just because it's like, this is shady, but I'll use this as an example. Joel Osteen don't make me hallelujah or amen. I have not ever heard anything that Joel Osteen has ever said that was profound to me. Like, oh shit, what? That's a rhema word ever,
Same.
ever, ever,
Same.
ever. Meanwhile, Joel Osteen has millions of followers
Uh-huh.
who
Yes.
are so greatly impacted by this motivationally speaking, preacher, and
Uh-huh.
and that is good for them.
Uh-huh.
Like shade in that, but that is good for them. And I don't fully mean it in shade, but I mean it is like shade. So I
It
just
is
want
it
yeah,
it
yeah,
is
yeah.
what it
So,
is.
but it's that I've learned to, just have the spaciousness of grace for the fact that some stuff is like I am not located there anymore. So, or
Mm.
I never was, but I
Yeah.
am not located there anymore. So that's never going to make me get up in the morning and toss confetti, right? And so I don't be in the comment section about it. I just be like, oh, okay, that's not for me, and I keep it moving. The same thing I said about Sexy Red earlier. I'm not shaming Sexy Red because Sexy Red isn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
I was born in the 80s, so I'm extremely judgmental about hip hop and women in hip hop. Like the standard that has been set for me, as someone who, if I didn't grow up super Christian, I would have been the greatest female rapper to ever live. I just didn't have the space or the freedom at the time to say the things that I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Sexy Red ain't gonna do it for me, period, honey. That doesn't mean that I'm gonna be over here like, don't get it sexy, get it sexy.
Right.
Get it.
That's really all I say, and I resonate with that. Even when you said it, I was like, yes, that's it. It's not that I dislike her music or what, it just doesn't resonate with me.
Right.
But Get It Sexy is definitely a vocal stem that I say often because it is what it is. Get it sexy, get it sexy. It's a vocal stem. At least between that and Mustard on a Beat Hole, I'm definitely rotating those different vocal stems. But I don't have anything against her. I think this is great that she has carved out a space for herself. But
her people love her. Period.
They do. They do.
Say this though. Boy, this ass super fat. I ain't mad at that actually. So there is that. That is that locates something for me. So yeah, I will get to that.
And you get it's nuggets. It's little nuggets. It's not the whole meal. It's those little nuggets, and you like. It's not the whole meal. It's little nuggets, and you like. That's it.
Yeah.
That's you like that. That's for me, and that I think I feel more empowered because now I know I have language that resonates with me and my body that I can say like, I'm just not really located there. Like that's not really pleasurable for me. It's not really resonant with me. And I don't have to, it doesn't have to come off as I'm being shady or I'm not being open to explore or I'm not giving someone the benefit of the doubt, which I don't like. That's another conversation for another day. I have problems with benefit of the doubt, but that's the thing. But or that I'm being like closed-minded or, just not open to receiving things that are outside what I listen to. I'm also 80s baby. I'm an elder millennial or geriatric millennial, what they call us. So I grew up on like classic hip hop, and I'm a Diggable Planets hip hop girl.
It's hard
so
to impress me.
It's hard. It's really hard. And you really got to come with some lyricism if you're going to get me like in what you're doing. And I love Meg and I love everything about Meg. I do believe she's a great lyricist of this generation. I love her energy. I love what she represents. I love how she's reinvented herself, how she has gone into this space and like you said, she's regulating her nervous system. She's in her soft girl era. She's being vulnerable. She's in that bag. She's touring. She got Beyonce's love. Like, it's great. And she's like one of the few artists that are out now that I love. I love a Rhapsody. I love a No Name. I love Tierra Whack. Like, I love those. And I feel like was something else that I had in my notes too, that the Rhapsodies and the No Names and the Tierra Wax are kind of like our philosophical hip hop wominists of this generation. And I feel like they bring a different perspective to how we're talking about pleasure and we're talking about women empowerment and things of that nature. And do you feel like that's another aspect of reclaiming pleasure outside of the profane? Is that a more deeper
1,000.
piece?
Yeah, I would even say so. Yeah, thank you for bringing back the sacred and the profane, because there is no judgment of it, right? It's just like it speaks to this. It's just very often when we talk about pleasure, and of course because it's your work, you know this, people do kind of automatically lean towards sex or sex or sexual pleasure in that way. But when I think about the reclamation of pleasure, and those particular MCs that you just mentioned, it makes me think about all the other ways in which I experience pleasure, in which I can experience ease, or if my mind is deeply stimulated and I want to I want to linger there for a while, that is the location of my pleasure in this moment, right? There are all these different ways that we experience pleasure. And even I think about the embodiment of the people that you just mentioned, the way that they dress, the way that their bodies are situated, the way that they aren't they're not necessarily the BBL girls, which is what it is, right? No judgment to that. But it's that there's even something that really speaks to a group of people as well in that. I am one of those people, but definitely speaks to a group of people in that, because I get to see myself as beautiful, and I get to see myself as profound. When I was on a billboard in Times Square last year for the book, and which was one of a dream that I had for years. I always wanted to be on a billboard in Times Square. But when I first started creating that dream, I used to be like, what is it that I do? I don't necessarily do anything that would be on a billboard in Times Square. Like, I'm not a model, I'm not an actress, I'm not, what is it that I would do to be on a billboard in Times Square? And so I reached this dream, this huge dream that I have for myself, to be on a billboard in Times Square. And the thing that me and she's my COO, but she's also a childhood friend of mine that works with me now. Me and Bettina stood in Times Square and squealed for like 30 minutes about the fact that being a smart Black girl is how I ended up on a billboard in Times Square. And so that my pleasure, like this great moment of my life that I'm experiencing this pleasure all throughout my body. It's not just this intellectual, it's embodied like thrill, like I can't believe it. I still get giggly when I really think about it. Like I come to the corner and I just looked up. I didn't even know exactly where it was, but get out. I know roundabout where I'm supposed to be going. I get out and I look up and it pops up as soon as I look up, and I just say, like, my whole body is just like, being a smart Black girl is what got me on a billboard in Times Square. And so I'm connecting that back to the, no names and the Rhapsodies, et cetera, because it's like, what pleasure do we get to really even pursue in the fullness of ourselves that is not just our sexuality, which is a place to explore. It's not to minimize it, but so often that gets put to the forefront, especially when we're talking about pleasure, and we don't talk about all the pleasure that we get from like realizing these other really, juicy parts of ourselves that has nothing to do whatsoever with the clitoris or, or the nerve endings in our bodies that can, cause us to climax, right? Like that. I'm so deeply pleased by learning that about myself. I'm so deeply pleased by knowing that about myself. And I'm talking about pleasure as a location too, that sometimes you got to see somebody else arrive at that location to even that location for themselves, right? To realize that it is a place to go. I've never been to Bali. I have seen my niggas go to Bali. Now I know certain destinations. Now I doubt that I would stay in the exact same Airbnb as them, or take the same flight as them, or sit in the same part of the plane as them. I will take my own path to get to that location. But now I know that it is a location that I desire to go to. And I couldn't have known that without Rhapsody. I couldn't have known this without Cardi B. I couldn't have known this without Nicki Minaj. I couldn't have known this definitely without Lil' Kim. I couldn't have known this without Queen Latifah. I couldn't have known this without the greatest female MC to ever live other than me, Beyonce. I couldn't have known this
It's true. It, like, even when I was thinking about thinking about specific rappers who talked about pleasure, I even had Missy in there. And there was like this huge conversation where people were like, I didn't know Missy was sexual. And I was like, tell me you never listened to a Missy Elliott song without telling me you ain't never listened to a Missy Elliott song, because Pussy Don't Fail Me Now is one of the first songs off one of the off her sophomore album. Like, I don't understand.
What is the song?
How'd you miss that?
What is the song? So Pussy Don't Fail Me Now is like definitely crystal clearly what she's talking about. But there's another what is the song where she basically is like she's not talking about a roughneck. She what is this song? I'll think about it before we get off the phone. Keep going.
I'm like, are you talking about Work It?
Nope. But no. It's actually listening to the lyrics kind of, situation. Like, you listen to, like, the first thing out of her mouth as soon as she started rapping was basically just the kind. Basically, I want you to choke me and slut me out. Basically, is what Nicki said.
Oh, I know what song you're talking about, and I don't know why it's not clicking for me, but I know what song you're talking about.
But yeah, so definitely, if I didn't know Missy was talking about sex,
what
all the time? Usually. You mean usually?
That's lyric? What?
Craziness.
But even Missy songs like Minute Man, and first of all, she had Trina twerking in the video, and that was just like the most amazing thing that I've ever seen before in my life. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, Trina, you got Trina to twerk in the video. Trina don't ever twerk in nobody's video because she don't hardly want nobody to know that she used to dance. So you got her to twerk in the video. This is exciting. But even just that, break me off and show me what you got, because I don't want no 1 minute man. Like, what? How did you miss that? It's all there. And this is like early 2000s. So she was at the top of her career when that album was out. So I don't understand how people were missing all of these notes.
You understand though. Because certain bodies
yes
don't
correct.
get to be sexual to the point that a sexual body that is not supposed to be, you can totally ignore the fact that they out here talking about sucking dick when that's what crystal clearly was happening.
You're right. Because, and not only, was she back then voluptuous, she's also dark skinned. And we already know how that looks in the eyes when we was talking about pleasure. They remove pleasure from dark skinned Black women and only light skinned Black women with big curly hair.
A little bit more meat on your body that make you more than just thick, honey.
Right.
What's your name? Because I'm impressed. Can you treat me good? I won't settle for less. You a hot boy. A rock boy, a fun toy, or a lot boy. Where you live? Is it by yourself? Can I move with you? Do you need some help? I cook, boy. I give you more. I'm a fly girl, as I like those. Y'all, what boys about? Are you riding alone? Can I be your date? Come get me. Get me. Don't diss me. Don't trick me. Got some friends. Can they come too? Can you hook them up? I want to hang out with. I want to hang out with Missy Elliott.
Yes.
So yeah, Missy Elliott. For just being super subtle about the fact that he wanted, like, then she digging in his pockets later in the lyrics, and yeah.
With a bomb ass haircut. Fly ass haircut. Killing it with the haircut. Yeah. So that I'm even thinking about the Missies of the world and thinking her songs and where it takes me to, because it's not just what it resonates in my body. It takes me to a specific time and place where I was experiencing pleasure. So like when most of Missy's song, like the height of Missy's career, I was in college. So now I have certain memories of what I was doing and who I was with. So it brings that nostalgic pleasure and not just that joyous pleasure. So now I have different notes of pleasure that are situated in my body. Yeah. So I love that. Pleasure is a location like that.
That I want to say too, just as thinking about that. First of all, make sure you cite and quote yourself with notes of pleasure, because I like that very much.
Thank you.
That's it for sure. I was thinking about another thing that I think hip hop lyrics really do very well is there's something that your body does automatically when you hear this music, because even though I was just talking those lyrics, like my body just automatically want to wind a little bit. Like it's something, no matter what, it's something that your body does. Or, you know, when we were chanting, get it sexy, it's something that your body does. And this exploration, you know, to find that location, I say it here as, you know, pleasure is a location, but more frequent language that I use is the seat of myself. And that is when, you know, when you're sitting in a chair, a comfortable chair, and you sit all the way down into the chair, meaning you're not like leaned up, you know, active in the chair. You're seated in the chair. What would it look like if you could live from that seat, right? To me, the seat is a regulated nervous system. So if you could live in that seat, it's not realistic that you could live in a seat. First of all, let me say that. But if you could create, if you could make the seat be the location, like this is where I'm good, this is where I'm safe, this is where I experience pleasure, this is where I know myself best, this is where, you know, I'm actually EbonyJanice when I'm fully seated in myself. That you pay attention to that, you get to know it so well that you can find your own activations to get you back there. So I'm coming from there to like the winding, whatever. There's something that happens to my body when I'm winding that feels very similar to the seat. It isn't the same feeling, but it does something for my body that is the same thing that happens for my body when I'm experiencing the seat. If I am experiencing participating in physical sex,
Right.
if I'm having sex and I can know the location of the seat, I will experience much more pleasurable sex because I'm not clenched up, I'm not tight, I'm not, you know, anxious in my body. I am fully seated inside of this experience. I am more likely to climax there. I'm more likely probably to squirt, to do some stuff that, you know, isn't even normal. But at any point I come out of my seat in any situation, I miss the most pleasurable aspects of it, right? If I'm at the grocery store, I have different things that I do to avoid because I live in a super white space. I have things that I do to miss the microaggressions. I usually am listening to a romance novel in my earbuds. And so anything that's happening, you know, you was trying to get smart. You was trying to ask me, I'm at Target and you with this gray dress on and you was about to ask me where the canned goods are. Like I work at fucking Target, right? These tools that I have keep me fully situated in my seat, which is the location of my pleasure, right? So I know the things that I do that I need to do to stay in my seat. I know the things that I can do to get to the location of that seat itself. And that is, you know, I know that our time is coming, but that is definitely something that I would want your listeners or anybody listening to this to consider, that there are different things that happen in the body, you know, throughout the day. And sometimes we pay more attention to what doesn't feel good, and we don't like move around in the body, like sway the body, arch the back, whatever, stretch a little bit to see like, oh, that feels good. What am I doing from day to day that I would be making that movement so that anytime I get into that position, I have located pleasure there. And so I know how to go there. Sometimes I could just be having a heavy conversation and I will sit with my legs open and I just start like rolling my shoulders. I don't care what the situation is. I could be in the boardroom or I could be on the block. If I need to get my body back in my seat, which means that something happening in my shoulders, we're going to have to deal with this right now, right? And so that is radical resistance. You know, that is a part of the ways that I am, resisting any idea this way that I'm supposed to be. What I'm supposed to be is in my seat. That's where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in my seat, looking like myself, sounding like myself, being myself. And whatever I need to do, anybody that's around just going to have to be in relationship with that. And if they're not willing to be in relationship with that, then that is information. And we'll go from there, right? So what does it look like for you to potentially start paying attention to when your body is experiencing pleasure, so that you can go to that location more swiftly, and or so that you can seat yourself there and be there for long enough to know what it feels like, so you know what it feels like as soon as you're activated out or triggered out of it, right? Because I know the little things that'll trigger me out of no shade, this is the end of my sermon. I have certain people that I'm close to, not to the exclusion of family members, not to the exclusion of parents, muted in my text messages sometimes, usually throughout the day. Because as soon as I see that name pop up on my text screen, I was doing something. Now I'm out my body and out my seat, out of the location that I just curated for myself. Whereas if I go into my phone actively to see who's trying to communicate with me, I went to that, right? That was my choice, not I let y'all trigger me out of my seat when I was just, sitting here minding my business and I got a text message. The house is on fire. Put it out. Like, what you want me to do?
What they got to do with me?
Call 911.
I am not it.
I am not the fire department.
I'm not it, friends.
Please call 911.
That is so resonant. So as you're talking, I'm like, oh, like all of these things are clicking for me because you're giving language to things that I've been doing like innately and naturally. I'm like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, okay. So now I have language. I can say this is what this is, and I can say this is what this is. And even you talking about the seat of yourself, I'm like, oh, so instead of using the overused term authenticity, I can say that I'm in my seat and that I've curated this seat, and I can say that this is my autonomy because I'm in my seat. So this is my space. This is my autonomy. And if I allow you to trigger me, it's because I allowed you to do it, and you can't because this is my seat. This is the seat of myself. So I'm like, wow. So now I don't have to say authentic and autonomy. I can just cite you and say, well, EbonyJanice calls this the seat of myself, and this is my space. This is my pleasure space. And I can go on, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, I'm in my seat. I love that. Like, this is my space. This is my seat. This is my pleasure. This is my location. This is where I decide to be. This is where I'm designing myself to be. And this is where I can be in my body. Even thinking about when I'm talking about pleasure mapping, well, the map is back to my seat. So what are the tools that I have?
That's where I'm headed.
That's where I'm headed. That's mapping me back to my seat. And I'm like, like you just connected so many dots for me just now. I'm like, this is, wow. This was great.
Yes. I love that. This is so off topic, but just because we homies and we can just talk about whatever we want to talk about on this little podcast. You practice Ifa, Isheshe is what is your Orisha? Are you initiate Orisha or
I'm Abarisha.
Okay.
So I just have my warriors.
Okay.
I've been told for years. So I've been part of, so I grew up Santeria. So that's how I was brought into Ifa. And I've been told since I was 9 that I have to receive and I have to be initiated. When that's supposed to happen, I don't know. But I've made peace with it. I just make sure I take care of my warriors, and I have my conversations with Eshu when I need to have conversations with Eshu, and I make sure those things are there. And when it's time, when they say it's time for me to go receive the Hana Ifa, then I'll do what I need to do, and I get my funds together and go ahead. But for now, I just take care of my warriors, and I'm straight.
I got it. I love that for you. I love it.
Thank you.
I was just curious. I was gonna make this connection even to pleasure as well, because I feel like since I've been on my own Ifa journey that I have I know things about myself that I couldn't have known before. I couldn't have known them because so much of it was demonized, right? Like that, the internalized anti-Blackness, and the revelation of being in my own initiations, particularly in Oshogo, Nigeria, right? You know, being in my own initiations and opening my eyes in certain situations and being like, wow, I hated this. You know, I demonized this idea my whole life. And now here I am in this very beautiful, pure, you know, experience. And I'm grateful that I am equipped for it now, right? I say that Southern Black Christianity was an initiation. And then me this path to Ifa, you know, is a whole other initiation. And so I don't regret it whatsoever. But I do have these moments where I'm like, I wish I knew this about myself, you know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But it's a very beautiful thing to deconstruct you know, what I call the Christian demonic filter, or like if you didn't grow up in Christianity, we grew up in a Christocentric society. And so much of our values and like even being able to access certain language inside when we were talking about hip hop, it's like you can't even access it because it's morally or spiritually or religiously it's wrong. And Ifa has just given me so much freedom and liberation to really be able to think about myself as in a more complete way. And I have been able to, you know, more deeply and specifically locate my seat as a result, right? Like I know, oh, yeah. I'm definitely supposed to be seated right there. I am a whole Orisha. Like of course that's where I'm supposed to be seated. So yeah. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. That I have had my ups and downs with Ifa because, you know, I tell people all the time, you don't choose Ifa, Ifa chooses you. So even if you don't want to, they write in your face, so it don't even matter, and they'll wait, not too long, but they will wait, and they will gather you when you need to go do your things. So, you know, I've had my times, and I want to be like, I'm done with this, like I'm over it, and they right there, scoop me up.
Going.
Where you going?
But to priesthood, you ain't going nowhere.
At all.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
It was such a pleasure to meet you, and I want to continue to learn more about Muse Lab and all the ways that I can support. So you let me know how I can support for sure.
I definitely will do that. I am elated. This was such a great conversation, and I cannot wait to share this with the Muse Lab community and all the people who be finding me and tuning in. So I'm really excited about that. Is there any final words, any last things that you would like to say?
I actually am opening my books up in the fall to some coaching. I haven't been coaching actively for the past 4 years, but I have an offering coming up. So get on my newsletter, EbonyJanice.com. I have an offering coming up where I'm going to be hosting people one-on-one in my home, which is a really big deal because my mom told me the other day, you don't even let me come to your house. My mom is being a hater. This is ridiculous. But I'm doing this very intentional work around supporting particularly Black women and femmes, supporting us into returning to ourselves, returning to our actual selves. And so doing these one-day retreats feels very resonant for me because I've been on my own one-day retreats with my own coach multiple times, and how transformative that time has been. And so I'm looking forward to like providing tools for what would it look like to actually co-create your dream world. And then by the time you leave my house, you have some tools to really go do really, really big things for yourself. So join my newsletter. It has not officially been announced, but I guess this is the first like official, you know, kind of me saying it out loud. And the people in the newsletter will get details and specifics about, you know, how to sign up for either a one-off call with me to see if that's something that will work for both of us, or to come on over to where I be. So yeah,
that's amazing.
Those are my final words.
That's amazing. So y'all better jump on that. I will have links and things in the show notes so you can join, because I don't know how long this is gonna last. So you might want to jump on that ASAPually. Yes, ASAPually. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, EbonyJanice, for your time, for your wisdom, for your candor, and sharing yourself with the Muse Lab community. And thank you all for tuning in. And until next time. Thank you for tapping into the Muses Lab. I hope you enjoyed this week's adventure. Be sure to like this episode, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and share the wealth with others. Sign up for my newsletter and join the TML community at www.themuseslab.com. Receive weekly musings, early access and exclusive drops, as well as discounts on products and services. Thank you once again for tapping in, and until next time.